Dust control is the biggest challenge when you're remodeling inside an occupied home. So I wanted to talk about 3 things that I do to manage the dust while I'm doing a job. First thing is I have my zip wall, and it's pretty simple. It's just thin painter's plastic on the zip poles. And what I do also to monitor how my airflow is, because airflow is important. First of all, I tell my customer to turn off the air conditioner or heater while I'm working, because if that register right up there is blowing out air, that means that the air is going to be coming through there, pushing out through that air opening right there, and causing the dust to go throughout the house until it gets to the return for the furnace. So what I do is I make sure I turn off the air conditioner, I put off, or the air conditioner heater, I put on my zip wall. And the second thing I do is in the bathroom, there's usually a vent, right? And I turn that vent on, because what that does, it causes what's called a negative airflow. In other words, air is pulling away from the main house and into that vent. And you can tell when you're doing that well. It doesn't have to be a lot of air, but just to make sure that the air doesn't flow outside the room. So if you come over here, you look at my plastic, the plastic there is bubbling into the room. And it's not bubbling by much, it's bubbling a little bit. That means that there's no air going that way. All the air is pulling in this way and into that vent. The second thing it's really important to have is a good vacuum. Now this is a DeWalt vacuum. I'll put the model in later. I've had this for years, but it's got a couple of things that don't work on it anymore, and I'll explain that in a minute. And what I do is when I'm cutting stuff, I use this as a new tool I just bought. It's a DeWalt small tile cutter, or stone cutter, and it really helps out, because when you're cutting, backer board, it creates a lot of dust. And usually when they talk about backer board, they say you can cut it with a blade, just do 4 cuts and it snaps, and it is a lot of work, and it doesn't always snap, and it doesn't always take 4 cuts, because your blade wears and the sharpness is gone within a few cuts, and it's just really hard to do. But with this right here, I can cut and have this vacuum suck up all the dust. Okay, and there's one thing about this tool which you need to be aware of. This has a reverse and a forward, right? And so I always make sure that when I'm cutting, you see the vacuum nozzle is on the front, right? So I make sure when I'm cutting that blade is turning this way, because it'll drive all the dust right into the nozzle and vacuum it out. If you have it going the wrong way, then it'll turn this way, and that'll cause the dust to kick back away from the nozzle, and it's really not effective at all. So you want to make sure, I just push this button right here in, so it's sticking out on this side, right? I push it in, so now it's turning clockwise, if I'm looking at it this way, and it makes sure all the dust goes in the nozzle. The second thing I do when I'm cutting on backer board is I always make sure that when I cut this, I don't cut all the way through, because once I cut all the way through, it's going to send dust out the back end, right? And so what I try to do is I try to cut mostly just below the surface like that, and so it'll snap off real easy once you make the first, the cut. And it'll go through a little bit, doesn't matter, but for the most part I try to keep it. If I see dust clouds building behind and I know there's a problem, I just pull it back a little bit and make sure I'm just cutting that upper surface like that, and it keeps all the dust coming out of the top right here, where it goes right into the nozzle. Now the problem I have with this vacuum again is that I'll talk about the good things. This has a self-cleaning filter, and when you run this, you hear it go pop pop constantly, pop pop. And what it does is it actually has 2 filters inside, and it blows air out of one right here. You can see a little diagram here. It blows air out of one to clear the filter as it's sucking out of the other, and then it'll suck through both, and then it'll alternate and blow air out this way on this one and suck on this one. So you're always getting the suction. It maintains a good suction, but the filters are constantly being cleared out. And so I really like this vacuum for many reasons, but the one problem I had is, okay, getting back to this right here. So this right here is you turn it on or off, right? And then this switch right here, you can tell to run off of the plug constantly, or right, which is on this side, or you can tell it to run this way. And what it does is when you pull the trigger on your tool, it will turn on the vacuum automatically and begin sucking, and then it'll run until you take the trigger off the tool, and it'll run for another, maybe 30 seconds to clear the line, and it automatically shuts off. Wonderful, not wonderful feature. But when you're running battery tools, then you have no cord going into this outlet right here. And what that does is it causes the, it won't turn on. So you turn on your tool, the vacuum didn't turn on automatically, you're blowing a bunch of dust, and you stop to walk over here to turn on the tool, and then go back to your work, cut, and then come back over here, turn off the tool, and keep going, which is kind of annoying, especially when you're on your knees a lot doing cuts. And so what I did to remedy that is I bought this right here at Home Depot, and what it is, it's a wireless on and off switch. So I keep this thing in my tool bag, and all I do is turn it on, and the vacuum turns on, turn it off, and the vacuum turns off. And I keep that right in my pocket in my tool bag so that I don't have to get up and make sure the vacuum is running when I'm cleaning or working. So again, this is what you use if you're running a battery operated tool where there's nothing plugged into the outlet. If you have like a regular chop saw and you have this hooked with your chop saw, your table saw, once you pull the trigger on your table saw, it'll turn on the vacuum, and it'll run after you turn off your table saw, clear out the line, and then shut itself off. Wonderful, wonderful feature. Okay, so those are the things that I do to manage dust. So recap, put in your zip wall, okay? If you have a fan in the area, you can put a fan in a window as well. If you can, to keep the air flowing, to get the negative airflow. I turn on the bathroom vent because I do bathrooms and kitchens mostly bathrooms. And so I end up turning that little fan on. Then I look at my plastic, make sure my plastic's being sucked in. Even right now, there's some airflow in here because there's a couple of holes in the drywall ceiling. But you can tell that it's pulling in, which means the airflow is pulling in from the house and into this room and escaping anywhere except for back into the house. So that's a wonderful thing. But this really helps you see where your airflow is. And so if you put that up, you just, and I like using the thin plastic because you can read the thin plastic real easy. It really moves with the air real easy. If this was having a positive flow, the air would be running from this room, and you see the plastic pushing out in the opposite direction. But you can tell right now it's pushing in, and it keeps that air dust control going. Second thing, get yourself a good vacuum. I really like this one here because it'll turn on and turn off automatically with the outlet right here. Once you turn on your tool, it turns on and off automatically. If you can't afford to buy one of these because these are more expensive, you can get your regular shop vac and buy this guy right here at Home Depot and run your filter. Use your remote control to turn your air on and off right here. Okay. On and off. And then if you can get tools that have a connector for this for your hose, it just makes it real easy. And I really like the DeWalt system because it has this lock right here, so I can just turn that right here and it comes right out. Okay, and it turns really easy on the nozzle so it doesn't bind up as much, and then you can lock it in like that and it won't come out anymore. So those are the things I do for dust control. When you're trying to work inside the house, you don't have to walk outside and make these cuts, because typically I would have to do all these cuts outside, and it's a problem. And one more thing is, when you're working in a house, it's not so bad. You walk outside, you make your cuts, you have a yard. But this happens to be a townhome, and your front yard is not your front yard. Your front yard belongs to everybody in the community, and when they're walking by really close to where you're cutting and there's a dust cloud, they're not real happy with that. So even if I was cutting this outside, I would still take the system and use it outside. But because it's so good, I can do that system in the house, manage the dust extremely well, and everybody's happy. I'm happy because I'm not breathing this stuff in. Customer's happy because the house is clean, and it's just a wonderful thing. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Share and like. Talk to you next time.